Jim Pearson is here with us. He is the city manager of Geneva. And I made a little mistake. I said you started out in Geneva as police chief, but you started out in police department, correct?
Police department,
yes. After
in
I said
October of 1974, rookie
wow.
policeman. So it's been 40 years of working for our city. And hey, before we get started, what do you think about those Browns last night?
They won.
I know, it was good.
Yeah, I'm not a huge football fan, but I mean they have a chance at the playoffs.
Yeah,
so
it was a good game, the Battle of Ohio, and it was nice to see him win.
Well, Pat Williams, who's usually here, is a big fan, and he wanted to enjoy the game and not have to worry about getting up this morning.
That's
so he
right.
took the day
yeah,
off.
Well,
so
it was a late one, yeah.
So yes. So you started out as a rookie patrolman, and you stayed with the city.
Yeah, it was almost instantaneous. When I graduated from Kent with a degree in law enforcement, and really took our test in Geneva, and there wasn't much turnover. We were pretty stable.
Were you from Geneva originally?
Yeah, born and raised there. So my wife and I had just been married, and we decided, well, we'll move to Columbus. There's maybe more opportunity for getting a job in law enforcement. So I had taken the test, and we moved to Columbus, and I just started taking tests down in the Columbus area. And one night my dad had called and said, hey, Bob Salisbury, and Bob was our first city manager.
Sure, I remember Bob.
Is going to call you and offer you a job to come back to Geneva. And it was kind of just strange the way that happened, but almost instantly, my first day on a job, I knew I didn't want to go anyplace else. It was home, and I had a great opportunity to serve the public.
I was going to say, as a police officer, you were probably serving people that you knew
Yeah,
as a police officer. And
absolutely. I don't know, if you talk to a variety of policemen, some would say, that's what I want to do, and some don't care for that. They would rather serve in another community and leave that community and come to where they live. And it's an individual choice, and I just always felt that, I was born and raised there, I love the community, and it just felt good to do that.
And so, you worked up the ranks as a police officer?
Yeah, actually, when I was appointed chief, I believe I was the youngest chief in Ohio. I had only been on the force about 8 years when I had the opportunity to, one of our chiefs had left, and I was appointed acting chief in '83, and subsequently was appointed chief in '85. So from '85 to 2000, I served as police chief in Geneva.
So there's a bit of a jump, though, isn't there, from police chief? How many police chiefs become city manager?
It's interesting. A lot do.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of my friends that I kind of paralleled through during my career did become city managers. Bob Reed in Bedford, and gentlemen in Rittman, and I think I don't want to say it's commonplace, but a lot do. Not that that was in my cards when I retired. I really retired from police work just because it was time for me to do that, with no real intention of being the 7th city manager in Geneva.
The second?
7th.
7th. Okay.
7th, I'm sorry.
So there were that many after Bob left?
Yeah, we became a city in 1958, and Bob was our first city manager. He had a long tenure.
Right.
I believe it was almost 20 years. And then we went through a series of other managers that came in from outside the area, about 3 to 5 years, and I know Conneaut has experienced similar.
Right.
And it's not good or bad, it's just the way sometimes it happens. And when after I had retired, I'd only been retired a few months when the last city manager left, and I got a call from the council president at that time to say, hey, would you consider coming back? And yeah, I guess my thought at that time was, well, if I can come in, help stabilize for a while, maybe it's a short-term thing, it would be good.
15 years.
15 years later, it's time for me to kind of move on. But it's been wonderful. you know, not that I didn't enjoy my career as a police officer, because I really did, even though you always have highs and lows during those careers. But being a city manager is totally different, and I really, really love having the opportunity to serve the community in that capacity.
One thing I wanted to mention is that Geneva and Conneaut are more similar in that they have an appointed city manager. Ashtabula is called city manager, but he's elected, so he's really a mayor.
I believe it's the only one in Ohio
Yeah.
that has an elected city manager. You know, in Ohio there's several forms of government, one being the council manager form of government, and then of course there's a mayor, and strong mayor and a weak mayor and so forth. But you know, it is an efficient form of government, and
well, an easy way that I compared, or I heard it being compared, is like a school board hiring a superintendent.
our charter, our council hires three people. They hire the city manager, they hire their law director, and they hire their clerk of council. And from that point on, in our structure, the city manager is the appointing authority, and he or she would completely run the organization, hire and fire all the employees under them. So, you know, I report to the council, and everybody else, you know, reports to me. So, from that perspective, it does work well.
Well, if you have too many people appoint too many people, it's like, Jim, why did this happen? It's not my fault. It's that guy you appointed to this position.
No, the buck stops with me. You know, everything.
No excuses.
No excuses. You're responsible, and you have to accept that responsibility. And really, I do serve at the pleasure of council, and I truly believe that that's the way it has to be, because, you know, if I'm not doing my job, then they have the responsibility to replace me with somebody that can do that. Or if visions change, you know, it's an interesting thing with councils and managers, and I know Conneaut has been experienced some of that. But really, when you, as a council, I believe they hire somebody that has the same vision that they do and want to move the community in that direction. And if that happens, it really works pretty well. It's just sometimes you fall out of sync, and I've watched that in Geneva over the years in some cases, and you can't accomplish as much as when you're all moving in the same direction.
Yeah, I mean, remember a few years ago in Ashtabula where every council meeting they're going to an investigation of this person or that person, and things are going along much smoother in Ashtabula, I think now.
And that's a perfect example of when you get managers and councils, and it just, sometimes you just fall in the line where you're just all on the same page and you're moving in the same direction, and that's a good thing for the community.
Well, Geneva has for a while moved in the same direction.
Yeah, we have. Geneva's been here again. I beat their drum because they've been a great community to work for. And over my 40 years, you know, I've worked for every city manager Geneva's had. Bob Salisbury hired me in, and I've had the opportunity to watch all the managers between us, and it really gave
mistakes.
Well, it really gave me a great foundation to work from, because you could see what worked well and what didn't work so good, and what some of the issues and problems that managers and councils and employees face over the years. So it really helped me a lot, having lived through those years. And
well, you were from Geneva, and when you were appointed city manager, I'm sure people didn't expect you to resign the next year and move off to, you know, someplace else. But what, you know, there are critics here in Conneaut that say that, you know, the city manager comes in, gets a few years of experience, and then starts looking around. So, I mean, which could happen, you know, in
it's happened in Geneva. Literally, we've had managers that have lasted just a couple years, and some that, I guess, you know, in our experience, and here again, it's just a pinpoint in council manager form of governments. But in Geneva, we had our first manager had a very long tenure, and then I came later on and had a longer one. And I don't know if it's because we were local. I don't know that I believe that totally. I just think that sometimes it depends on the individual and what they're
Right.
looking for. Where do they want to settle? I will tell you, our second city manager, Mark Thompson, came in after Bob Salisbury retired, and Mark was here for about 3 years, and then he moved on. But he had a hard road to follow, Bob Salisbury.
Yeah.
And
Everybody liked Bob.
I believe today that Mark Thompson would still be here today as our city manager had he not had to follow Bob. But, you know, he left here and went up to Oakwood Village, and he's been there ever since.
Oh.
So you find sometimes you find that home, and you kind of settle in, and everything works well. So, you know, I can't speak for Conneaut, but I would say that at some point that will happen here, and you'll have somebody that finds Conneaut as their home, and that's where they want to work, and it'll be fine. And there's nothing, you know, I love even the managers that had a short tenure. I can point to all of the things that they accomplished while they were here.
That's true.
And so
it's not like it was wasted time or anything like
right.
that.
Some are good, some aren't so good. You know, I can say some things that, you know, we didn't get done maybe in Geneva during certain tenures, but they all, I can almost point around the town and say, you know, this manager was involved in this project, and it was a success. So even though they may have a shorter tenure, they can do some good things also.
We have a little video I just put together, some things that I've covered in Geneva. Give people a little bit of a taste if they don't go to Geneva that much as to what's going on. So we can comment on it on the screen here. Wherever, yeah, okay. So this is pairings back in January, and it's changed a little bit.
It has. Pairings, it was an interesting project. Actually started probably some 6 years ago when my assistant manager and myself came back from a conference in Columbus, and we had a seminar there that talked about asset-based economics, and really, you know, this was
This is what it looks like today.
Yeah, this
a lot different.
Yeah, a lot different. But it was a project, or the thought process was on asset-based economics. It was about the time the economy was tanking in '08, and they said you really need to go back to your communities and look at what you do well, and try and improve upon those, and don't try to become something you're not.
Right.
You know.
By the way, Jennifer's not here, but we got her on the right side of that video.
Yeah.
There, so.
That's my assistant manager, and this was.
We can talk
at
about
the
it 'cause she's not here.
Yeah, we can. But anyways, going back to that project, it really was, from the city's perspective, a economic development project where we wanted to have Geneva be a destination for the grape and wine industry. And Pairings really was patterned after a facility in New York State in the Finger Lakes, the New York Wine and Culinary Center. And it really is to sponsor and help showcase all of Ohio's ag products, wine being the most forward in that project.
Yeah, and I think you're the one that told me that you found that businesses in downtown Geneva, some of them were hurting in the wintertime, and that this was a way of keeping something downtown in the winter that's going to get people to the different businesses and all.
If you really drill down into the Pairings feasibility study and what we looked at and why we wanted to pursue this, it was really our asset. You know, I'm always jealous of Conneaut because you have, in a deep water port, you have Lake Erie at your doorstep, you have Conneaut Creek that runs, you have all these natural resources, and really when you look at Geneva proper, we don't have any of that. So what we have is our little downtown, and we need to emphasize that. And I've watched during my time with the city, you know, the businesses struggle to keep their doors open. And so we needed to drive foot traffic into our downtown, and we think that, you know, as Pairings develops and the campus develops through some additional phases we want to do there, that it will help support the downtown by driving some foot traffic into the downtown. So from the city's perspective, it was economic development. Now, there are other people on the board that come from a whole different viewpoint. You know, Donnie Winchell is on the board. She's director of Ohio Wine Producers.
She's on the video there.
Yeah, and Ken Johnson has been a very big supporter, and so we tried to blend in a lot of different aspects to help that facility be successful.
And it's kind of difficult to say exactly what Pairings is. It's not a restaurant. It's but there's classes there, and you can just stop there and have wine and cheese, and you can get information. They sell some wine, and there's a huge frontage there that they can be building new buildings, and this kind of just the beginning.
It is. It really is phase one. The whole build out would be about 38,000 square feet with an incubator and a larger hands-on kitchen, amphitheater style classroom,
yes,
and then a little event center for small weddings and so forth. So the board now will be focusing, because the windows on Pairings is now open, we'll start to shift and focus on building the rest of the campus out. But it really is a unique building, a unique concept, and we would encourage everybody to come, because the culinary, there's two wings, there's a culinary and then there's the wine side, and when you look at what New York did, it's been hugely successful over the last, they've been open about 9 years now.
And it's not just wine. I know that they were having classes for kids, teaching kids to cook.
The classes.
There's classes about how to start a business.
Yeah, we've had little. I think Andrew Bushweiler from Lake House came in and taught a kind of an Airbnb type class. You know, one of the other things that I know Jennifer is passionate about is the entrepreneurship and developing skills here in Asheville County to help us all grow our economy. So there'll be a lot of different types of classes, although we were kind of focus it around local foods and foods. But as we grow, I'm sure we'll see a lot of pretty unique classes there.
And Jennifer was going to be here, but she's receiving an award somewhere else.
Yes, so she couldn't be with us.
And I said we can talk about it because she's not here, but I don't know if it was Mark Winchell from the Tourism Board, or somebody was talking about how when they were putting that together, she was there on the weekends, scraping paint and painting. You know, there are some people that want to be in the limelight and jump into the photos and that sort of stuff, and she is not.
No, she is definitely a huge asset for our community and what she does for the city. But for Pairings, you know, she was there from day one, and you're right, the weekends, painting, scraping, doing whatever needed to get done. And so.
I'm not a big fan of scraping and painting.
Well, you know, we started with an old carriage house that sat on the school property, and that's really the framework from which Windows on Pairings was built around, and it's a really
we can see the video, the transformation.
Yeah, it's a unique little building. We tried to keep as much of the architecture, original paint,
doors,
the
barn
doors.
Things, yeah.
Actually, when they demoed the floor out, they found a well inside that probably serviced the animals that were in the carriage house there. So it does have some history, and it's a cool little building.
As you can see on that. We have talked a lot about JEDs, and I've done a few videos on them, but it's kind of a unique to, and I had the Harpersfield Township trustees on here talking about it. It's kind of unique in that the Geneva Harpersfield area is the only place in Ashtabula County that has done JEDs, which are Joint Economic Development Districts.
Got it, Bob.
So what does that mean?
Well, for us in Geneva, and here again, because I've been there so long, I've watched the history, and where communities need infrastructure, and Geneva is probably the perfect example. Our community has our own wastewater treatment plant, and the townships that surround Geneva don't have access to that. And for years and years, we literally fought over annexation issues. And the city would say, if you want our infrastructure, you have to come into the city, and the townships obviously objected to that, and it created a lot of hard feelings and bitterness. And we literally did that for 20 or 30 years. And finally, we just said to each other, we got to just stop this. This is crazy. We're not really making much progress. And
for
so,
any of the communities.
For any community.
Yeah.
But the state of Ohio gave us a tool to use, which is the Joint Economic Development Districts. And it's a great tool because it's so flexible in nature that the communities can sit down together. They can talk about what they need from each other and how they might share some of the revenue that would be derived out of increasing the infrastructure that will allow for the economy to grow. So we've used those tools, and we've used them 3 times now, and they've been hugely successful. It has just allowed us to partner and work together rather than just sit in the center of town and duke it out.
So if Geneva says we're not going to cooperate, then Spire doesn't show up in Harpersville, or Pizza Hut doesn't show up in... And the fact that they do show up means that is good for Geneva as well.
It's good for Harpersville.
Right.
Both, because we share in that revenue. And the two driving, typically it's a project. In our JED 2, it was Nordic Air at the time, it's now HDT, wanted to expand. They wanted to grow that business, and they could not do that without the infrastructure, the sanitary sewers. So Ron Clutter called me one day and said, Jim, we really are at a critical juncture where we either are going to move out of the area down south to the Carolinas to grow our company, or we need to get sewer. So literally the next day we piled into a car and drove down to Twinsburg to the EPA and started that discussion with them. And from that came JED 2, which allowed us to run our sanitary sewers under Interstate 90 and sewer about 300 acres around that facility that Mr. Clutter was expanding. So that was really a great project that allowed us to do that. And then Spire in JED 1 here again allowed us to get that infrastructure out to support that facility. And just most recently we created a 3rd JED, which will allow us to do a gravity sewer from the north side of 90 straight down 534 into the community, which will open up that whole west side of Route 534 for development. And
we showed just a little bit ago the video of the big check that the Ohio Department of Development gave toward that. It was like, was it $100,000? Yeah, we've actually, it's about a $2 million project to get the sewer installed. And we've received about $650,000 to date in grants. And then the rest of the financing scheme will be based on some tax increment financing, and the property owners will share in some of the burden by development fees, and then the balance will be the city will take out a loan from the WPCLF to close that gap. So these projects usually are project driven, but there's a lot of components that go into making that financing work. And we, the Ohio Public Works Commission, we have a grant from them. The Local Government Innovation Fund, which really this fund looks at people who partner and work together. They have given us, that was the $100,000 grant. That had a match component to it. And there's some other grants that total up to that 650. Well, what this all leads to simply, though, is that when you get off of I-90 at the Geneva exit, there is stuff there, and there should be more stuff there, right? They were talking, I was talking to somebody that was developing, or talking about developing another, was it a hotel there? Yes. And a couple more restaurants, to be one over, like by Pizza Hut there, and one we have a sit-down restaurant. Well, there's about 7 acres by the McDonald's there that there's this one gentleman that owns it, would love to develop that, and that's really where the developer is looking for a hotel and some outlots for a couple of restaurants. So, you know, all these things come together sometimes, and it allows you to move these projects forward.
And it is a lot of work, and it's years in the making. We've been talking about JED 3 now for the last 2.5 years, and we still have probably another year or two to kind of complete that project. So they are long, they're involved, there's a lot of cooperation that comes along with this to make these things happen. And here again, I can't say enough about our staff and Jennifer Brown in particular, and her dedication and persistence and hard work that really pays off in dividends.
You know, when I said we were talking about Jennifer, it was kind of like, this is all good stuff.
No, well, that's about all I can say about her is good stuff. She's just very, you know, someday I've always said before I leave, I'd like to add up the millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars that she has brought through her efforts into our community in so many different ways. You know, she's worked on a lot of brownfield grants that have allowed business to expand in Geneva, and it really is important that you have people that are dedicated like that and work hard for the community.
Now that segues into a question I was going to ask, because when Tim Eggleston, his last day on the job, I did a little interview with him, and I said, you know, Geneva is a smaller city. It has an assistant city manager. You don't. Do you think, Connie, is it too much for one person? Do you need an assistant city manager? He said, not really. He said that Growth Partnership gets involved with economic development. And, I mean, I'm not trying to pitch you, but I know that you have a different perspective on
I
this.
do have a different perspective on that. And by the way, I think a lot of Tim. I think he did a great job while I was here. But I do have a little different perspective. I understand a lot of times that typically people do the work, and managers are presented with a lot of different issues that they deal with daily, and you almost have to prioritize. If you're a manager without an assistant, you just can't. I'm just, from my experience, you just cannot do it all and do it all proficiently and get everything done that you need to do. When you just look at dealing with employee issues, as an example, and how much time do you want to invest in your employees and making sure that they're performing at the highest level. But then when you start to look at writing grants and putting together projects that take a lot of meeting time, and you just get into so many different things that I don't believe that you can accomplish them all. And I think that's some of the problems that small communities have with getting all the work done that needs to be done, because it's massive when you really look at, you know, whether it's building roads and sewers and maintaining everything and dealing with your employees and writing grants, and I can go on forever and ever talk about this. And we can't get it all done, even we do have an assistant manager. But let me just tell you this: my pitch to council that ultimately allowed me to hire an assistant manager. And by the way, Jennifer does more than just assistant manager. She does all our zoning and those issues also. So she wears many hats.
Scraping the paint.
Including the paint. We do whatever we need to do in
Right.
Geneva. You know, every job description that we have and any other assigned duties. But anyways, going back, what I think council really liked the most about the assistant was, I kind of presented to them because I had the opportunity to watch the transition with managers. But when you lose a manager, as you just did, your employees are kind of, I call it marching in place. They're doing their jobs, but you're really not. And now, who is going to pick up all the projects that Tim may have started and carry them forward? And so my pitch to council was, listen, if I drop dead tomorrow, we're not going to miss a heartbeat, because the assistant manager knows everything that's been done, and they will carry that forward. So I say you lose a year or 2 years of productivity every time you change managers. And that's just my observations over the years, because just think about it. Somebody coming in from the outside, if they're going to come in from the outside, if you don't hire a local person, and just having them understand who all their employees are, how to even communicate or drive around your community,
How do you get to
How do you get to someplace? Where do you don't understand any of the county officials that you're going to be dealing with all the time? And the list is on and on. And when you have somebody that kind of can step into that when somebody falls and breaks their leg and they're off 6 months, or they decide they're going to leave, or whatever the case might be. So I think there's a good case to be made for having an assistant manager in whatever size community you have. But it does depend on what do you want to accomplish, and what do you want to prioritize. And I just think it's done wonders for our community over the last 15 years.
We were talking about getting off of I-90 Geneva 534, and that's the 534 corridor. And there is a group there that is out there pushing it, and
I think the judge really opened our eyes to a lot of things, and the biggest was, kind of that partnering, working together, and moving the area forward. And out of that came the Route 534 corridor study, which ultimately was a ODOT study, first in the state of Ohio, and we're kind of proud that we were kind of the guinea pigs for this. But typically when you do a corridor study, you're looking at traffic issues, traffic management, traffic access, those types of issues. But this was the first corridor study in the state of Ohio that used smart growth principles, and so they looked at many other issues. They engaged the community. We talked about zoning, we talked about land use issues, and those types of items that kind of would, at the end of the study, gave us a roadmap for the next 10 to 15 years to look at this corridor. Because let's face it, if somebody's coming to visit, they don't care whether they're in Harpersfield, Geneva Township, Geneva City, Geneva on the Lake. They want a good experience, and that's what we want to provide them. So out of that corridor study, the study gave us an implementation plan and items to take care of. Well, okay, now what do we do with those? Who's going to do them? We're all individual entities. So we really studied what the state statutes would allow us to do, and what we could do to bring that same group together to further the corridor. And out of that came our Geneva Corridor CIC, Community Improvement Corporation. We felt that was probably the structure that would do the best for us. So that just has been formed. We filed our articles of incorporation, and we're in the process of starting to make that happen. Kind of coincided with the CIC, we also formed Route 534 Connect. And that group really was focused more, excuse me, on the marketing of the corridor and creating new events and working on shoulder season and midweek improvement for the travel and tourism. So we have a lot of people coming together.
What this does, though, is tries to get businesses along the corridor. Correct. And the 534 lunch.
Yeah, the 534. $5.34.
Different restaurants at different times will have $5.34.
Yeah, I think Sarah Bale, Sarah is who we the group employed part-time to work with Connect. I think they have 17 restaurants and wineries now that you can go in and get your $5.34 lunch. So those are the types of things that we're constantly thinking about and working on, is how do we improve the corridor, and how do we improve the experience that people get when they come, to our area. And it's working well. I think we're just really in the beginning stages of both of those organizations, and I think you'll see them grow and prosper.
Right. It's kind of planting the seed now, and we'll see what happens.
Right. And it's really about people working together. We can't, we learn that. We just learn we can't fight with each other and expect things to happen. We need to all, it's hard enough when we're all working together to make things happen. I mean, it really is difficult, even when everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction.
So, but you have to do something. You can't just sit back and...
That's another thing. Nobody is going to bring us anything on a little silver platter and say, here, Bob, here's funding for your community. As a city manager, you're charged with you know, how do you provide the services that the community needs with the revenue that you generate? And it's a difficult task, you know, with especially in the last few years with the reductions in our local government fund and the estate tax, and to our small community of Geneva, it meant about $500,000 in revenue, and that is a big hole to fill.
Sure is.
When you're a town of 6,500 people, and so, you know, we just don't expect that to happen. We need to go out and make something happen that will help provide services for our community.
I wanted also, because we're running out of time, guys, I think we saw a video there of the Grape Jamboree and the Winterfest, and downtown Geneva is doing pretty well, and they like to have people come down. I mean, the Geneva, I said something to somebody that at the Grape Jamboree, which we see there, it's kind of like the crane shot in Gone with the Wind. You know, when it goes up and you see all of those bodies.
Yeah. This was a big year. We had such great weather.
Right, and this here is Winterfest. That was not such great weather.
That's
but,
not.
But it's like we need. But you know, it's like getting people downtown. It can't be just a warm weather time. So they have Winterfest with activities inside the recreation center there, and different things.
We really are trying to embrace, you know, the off season, as we would call it, you know, just to get people out of the house and enjoy what we have, and so there's a lot of people that work very, very hard to put these events together, and as you can imagine, the Grape Jamboree, I think they're in their 52nd or 53rd year, and I know how hard those people work and what a large organization it is, and they just need all the support and help they can get. And as a city, our council has always supported them in their efforts, because it does bring a lot of people into the community to show off kind of what we have to offer, and we hope that they come back and want to visit us again, you know, in the different parts of the year.
I can't remember the name, but what is the little drugstore down there?
Reese's.
Right, it's just on Reese's.
Kind of a landmark in Geneva.
I was shooting something in downtown Geneva, and the camera, I didn't even notice it, but the camera swings by, and when I'm watching it later on the computer, what's that? And so I called her up, because it looked like an interesting place, and the first thing she wanted to know is, how much is this going to cost me? And I said, it's not going to cost you anything, but I want to come by, and what an interesting place that is.
There's a lot of history.
And she worked for the government. She worked for the FBI in Washington, and she came back, and we're doing this video, and it's still on our website, greatwavecom.com. But she was almost in tears. She said, I just want people to know how wonderful my town is. She came back retirement, and it's not a regular drugstore. They don't sell drugs. They can't compete with CVS or Rite Aid or anything. Yeah. But it's got antiques. It's got common, you know, like some things that you might need, like Band-Aids and that kind of stuff. They sell wine. But it's really just to walk around.
They did try and keep some of the old drug paraphernalia.
Yes. And
actually, the Reese's, it was 3 or 4 generations that actually operated as a drugstore. And as a child, I used to go in there, and they had a soda fountain.
Which they still have.
And they still have, and they replicated that. But, you know, they had the 5-cent phosphates, and you could get a cheeseburger or a hot dog. And it was just a really a neat place to go. And so we're very happy that it's still there.
Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, hello, Bob. I just want to call and wish you a happy weekend. Good weekend.
Well, thank you.
You did a great job on the show today. It's Friday, and it's hailing down here by the lake.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's not too good of a day. All right, well, thank you.
All right, have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
So yeah, we're constantly trying to create events for people to come and enjoy the town. We just experienced School Fest, and that's another wonderful thing. If you haven't been there, next year bring your children down. It's kind of spectacular what they do in our old city hall.
I have to remember that.
Yeah, it's really a interesting haunted house that they put together.
I decided, we got about 2 minutes, Chocolate Fest. I thought it was just chocolate. And I was talking to Jennifer. She says, no, this is a business thing. This is like a business expo. But every place you go, you pick up chocolate.
Pick up chocolate, yeah.
So,
no, I know
some people out there have some good ideas.
Yeah, that's a Geneva Rotary event. So everybody gets involved in the community, and it's really just a wonderful place to live and work, and as well as all of the communities in Asheville County. We all need to work in the same direction, because what's good for Conneaut is good for Geneva and vice versa.
I think any second they're going to shut us off.
Okay.
So, Jim Pearson, thank you very much for coming in, and it's been fun, it's been interesting.
Well, thank you, Bob, and I enjoyed it.